Mr. President, I beg to move the following motion standing in my name. Whereas it is provided by Section 63(1) of the Public Finance Management Act, number 14 of 2020, the Act, that the Minister of Finance may, by an affirmative resolution of Parliament, borrow from a bank or other financial institution for the capital or current expenditure of government. And whereas it is further provided by Section 64 of the Act that money borrowed by the government must be paid into and form part of the consolidated fund. And whereas the Minister of Finance considers it necessary to borrow the amount of US $8 million from the International Development Association for the Organization of the Eastern Caribbean States Data for Decision-Making Project. And whereas the service charge is the greater of A, the sum of 3/4 of 1% per annum, plus the basis adjustment to the service charge, and B, 3/4 of 1% per annum on the withdrawn credit balance. And whereas the maximum commitment charge rate is 1/2 of 1% per annum on the unwithdrawn finance balance, and whereas the loan is repayable in 40 years commencing from the date of disbursement of the loan, inclusive of a grace period of 10 years. And whereas the principal amount of the loan is repayable on each 15th day of March and 15th day of September each year, commensurate with the following terms. A, 1% of the loan amount commencing on the 15th day of September 2032, and including the 2032 and including the 15th day of March 2042. B, 2% of the loan amount commencing on the 15th day of September 2042 and including the 15th day of March 2062. Be it resolved that Parliament authorizes the Minister of Finance to borrow an amount of US $8 million from the International Development Association to finance the Organization of Eastern Caribbean States Data for Decision-Making Project. Be it further resolved that A, the service charge is the greater of 1, the sum of 3/4 of 1% per annum, plus the basis adjustment to the service charge, and 2, 3/4 of 1% per annum on the withdrawn credit balance. B, the maximum commitment charge is 1/2 of 1% per annum on an unwithdrawn financial balance. C, the loan is repayable in 40 years commencing from the date of disbursement of the loan, including a grace period of 10 years. D, the principal amount of the loan is repayable on each 15th day of March and 15th day of September each year, commensurate with the following terms. 1% of the loan amount commencing on the 15th day of September 2032 and including the 15th day of March 2042. 2% of the loan amount commencing on the 15th day of September 2042 and including the 15th day of March 2062. Mr. President, if I may just offer some explanation with regard to this particular motion. This motion, as it is called, the OECS Data for Decision-Making initiative, if I can call it, really is something that not only St. Lucia but other Caribbean countries like Grenada, St. Vincent and the Grenadines have taken advantage of or are accessing. St. Lucia accessing 8 million and the other countries different amounts. This is a general move by these countries, and rightfully so, to improve our ability to make decisions that are driven by data. And I think I must credit all the OECS countries that have decided to go in that direction. It is a very basic principle in any profession or any practice that decisions made based on data, authentic data that is gathered, is usually more properly guided, and it is best practice. And in this country, I have witnessed in my few years on this earth several decisions that have been made, and I don't want to chastise any particular government at this point, by both governments, private sector, and others, that were not properly researched, that were not based on sound, authentic data, that were not informed by empirical evidence, that have cost the country and cost others a lot of pain. It is not good practice to just make decisions based on feeling or based on a hunch or some kind of arbitrary, feel. It is important that research and data guides what we do. And I think it's a move in the right direction. I think it's forward thinking. I think it's progressive. And I commend the government of St. Lucia, and as well as the other governments of the OECS who have decided to take advantage of this opportunity. I just want to give 3 examples of what the breakdown of this loan is intended to do. Mr. President, one of them, a sum of 3.5 million US, is going to be committed for statistical modernization and capacity building. The census operation comes to mind. As we know, Mr. President, every 10 years we have a national census. I think it's going on right now. And basically what a census does is gather information on 2 main things: living conditions and the socioeconomic situation of households. But I think in that 10-year gap, so much can happen in a country. And I think if we have to rely on only that single initiative to guide our policy making and our decision making as a government, I think we'd be falling short. Because let's just compare how things have changed between, say, the decade 2010 to 2020. I mean, who would have thought that in 2019 we would have had to be locked down, we would have had to make all these changes in our lives, and we cannot really plan for those. If we gather data a lot more regularly, a lot more systematically in all of the sectors in this country, agriculture, for food production, anticipate trends in the global sector, in education, in sustainable development, which is a big issue now, in the banking and financing, in science and technology, I think we are better placed to make informed decisions. That is what data-based decision-making does. You have a basis, a scientific basis upon which to make decisions. And I really applaud this initiative. Another one, Mr. President, another area that some of this money is going to, is a total of 3.7 million for data collection and analysis. Data collection is just one aspect of the use of data. And anyone here who has done formal research understands that. I think all of us here have done that. We've done, most of us have had tertiary level education, and we understand that in the process, you don't just gather the data. You can gather it and put it on a shelf and it has no meaning, no use. You can even gather it and interpret it badly or analyze it poorly, and then you make the wrong decision. So if you have the expert knowledge, the resources to first gather data and then to analyze it properly, then you are in a position to make decisions that are relevant. Mr. President, finally, by way of example, a sum of 800,000 US is being put towards project implementation. And again, that is critical, because once you've been able to establish what the data is picking up, you've been able to analyze it properly and decide what you do, your priorities, and each of your decisions, then one of the serious challenges becomes implementation. And I know many governments of the past who have had good policies, very good policies, both St. Lucian and others, and United Workers' Party governments in the past. I can't really speak of the last one, but previous to that, and the Lucia Labour Party governments, and other regional governments, they had good stated intentions. They had outlined certain policies, very well articulated, but they did not implement. They failed to implement because there was no serious implementation plan in place to ensure that these policies were translated into action that was meaningful and contributed to the country's development. And so it is important that as part of the effort, we don't only gather data and analyze data and put the mechanisms in place for it, but we also prepare for proper implementation of what the data is telling us to do. So I really believe that this is a very comprehensive approach to it, and I'm very happy that these various aspects were laid out. Finally, Mr. President, I want to just mention that it is important at this time, 2022, when we have a real fast-paced, technologically advanced world, that we make use of timely access to data. Timely access to the information you want is critical. There are things we try to find out, but by the time we go find it out, it's way too late. It's not relevant anymore. And if we had that information before, we would have been better placed to make a decision. And a good example of that is, Mr. President, I will not be distracted. But just to be relevant, had some analysis been done about the relevance of ebooks in 2020 or 2018, whenever it was introduced, we would not have had a stack of that packed up in the office somewhere near the Parliamentary Secretary for Education now, that we have nothing to do with. That we are now paying, we have to pay licenses for, we have to pay the cost of, and the students they're not using it. And now we have to go back to give them the laptops. I don't think that there was proper data analysis and proper collection of information to guide that behavior. And so the implementation was bad. And so the timely collection of data is critical. When you get the information, can decide whether you are going to make the right decision or the wrong decision. So I really applaud the initiative that and the intention of this motion, and I really hope that it is going to put us in a better position to be better informed on the decisions that we make on behalf of the citizens of this country. Thank you, Mr. President.
Head of Government Business.
Thank you, Mr. President. For once, I think I'll have no reason to be more than a minute or two. First, let me thank the Leader of Opposition Business for his contribution. I think I sense that there is support for the bill, for the motion, which is encouraging and wise. I think issue that was raised in his contribution was the issue of not having collected data to guide the introduction of the Universal Secondary Education Program. I will not dispute that, because the hindsight has exposed some of the weaknesses of that program. But I'll tell him that one of the things that is being done now, and that the Prime Minister in his allocation of portfolios under education, there is a department known as vocational studies, and this signals a focus. So the schools that were built, and we may find correctly so that the population rate has dropped, and the statistics are showing that. But what is more important is to deal with the situation as we go forward. It is important now that we repurpose these schools. A lot of these schools that are not up to maximum capacity, after 3 o'clock, after 4, there's need to repurpose. And repurpose in what ways? There's a lot of after-school programs, technical and vocational programs that resemble what we had as NELU and NELP, where you give persons a second chance and concentrate on the technical areas. Good evidence of that is what we just did on Monday of this week. On Monday of this week, this government was in cul-de-sac at around 9:30 a.m., and we had a sword-turning ceremony to build the care facility. And if you're going to build any educational institution now, or even renovate or expand, you must be guided by the stats that tell you that the future of our education is about having the competencies that are relevant to deal with the reality of the day. And technical education is one of them. That is why we're not going to build a grammar school, but we are putting a care institution in place. So I welcome that initiative, and I look forward to our students getting a second chance through that institution. And finally, Mr. President, the greater investment in what we're borrowing here today I think the leader of opposition business cited several times the social and economic review. Suspect his leader had real difficulty reading from it in the last sitting. But I think I want to just mention that it's not the only point of reference that we should use in dealing with or discussing data. I think we should also look at what component 4 of the motion says, and I'll just read it for the benefit of the Senate. And I'll end with that. It says this 0.8 million, that's about 800,000, will be put towards project implementation. And it says, I quote, this component will support the Project Implementation Unit, PIU, in St. Lucia, covering the hiring of PIU staff, recruitment of consultants on a needs basis, not just anyhow, on a needs basis, audits, equipment, including laptops for hiring PIU staff and operating costs. Here is an example of how you target your spending based on what you need. It's not just doing things because you just feel like you do it. You have recognized what you would need and you're borrowing the money to spend on the targeted necessary intervention. So I thank him again and I thank you, Mr. President, for your indulgence and hope that as we move forward with the implementation of these programs that they will benefit us all. Thank you, Mr. President.